You were never meant to understand the system. You were meant to function inside it quietly, efficiently, predictably. From the moment you opened your eyes, the world was already designed for you. The schools that shaped your curiosity, the media that shaped your fears, the dreams that were handed to you before you even had time to choose your own. They gave you purpose so you wouldn't question direction. They gave you rewards so you wouldn't notice the leash. And they gave you comfort not to free you but to keep you still, a soft chair, a stable paycheck, a life that feels good enough to stop you asking what good really means. You think you're free because you can choose. But freedom isn't the same as variety. Every choice you see, the job titles, the ideologies, the lifestyles, was placed there long before you arrived. You were told that choosing between them was the definition of power. You were trained to run faster, to speak louder, to become someone defined by achievement, and yet the faster you move, the less you see where you're going. You were told that success would mean freedom. But if that were true, why do so many people who make it still feel trapped? The system doesn't need your rebellion. It needs your participation. Rebellion without direction only feeds it. It gives, it contrasts, attention, drama. And the most dangerous prison is the one you decorate yourself. You were told to chase success, to follow the rules, to stay safe, but no one told you who wrote those rules or who benefits when you obey. If you've ever felt that something about this world doesn't quite fit that quiet sense that you're playing a game without knowing who keeps the score, this is why. The truth isn't hidden from you. It's buried beneath everything you were taught to believe: your habits, your hopes, your fears. Truth isn't profitable. Confusion is. But before you can see the system for what it really is, you have to see yourself, the version of you it carefully built. They didn't build the system around you, they built you around the system. From the moment you learned to walk, you were told where to go. From the moment you could speak, you were told what to say. Every word, every habit, every small decision became another brick in the identity you never really chose. You think your thoughts are yours, but they were written by repetition, by schools that reward memorization over imagination, by jobs that trade your time for approval, by societies that mistake obedience for virtue. They taught you to compete, not to create, to work, not to wonder, to exist, not to awaken. You were shaped by invisible architects, teachers, parents, bosses, institutions, each one thinking they were helping, never realizing they were carving you into predictability. The system doesn't fear chaos, it fears uniqueness. Chaos is easy to manage. You just build stronger rules. But uniqueness can't be standardized. It asks questions. It breaks patterns. It says no when everyone says yes. So the system learned to break you gently, not with violence, with expectations. Be realistic. Don't be naive. Grow up. Be normal. You hear those words so often that one day you start saying them to yourself. You police your own boundaries. You shut down your own curiosity. You become both the prisoner and the guard. And that's how the system survives, not as a prison outside of you, but as a voice inside your head. And if who you are was built to serve the system, then what happens when you stop serving? The system gave you choices so you'd never notice the limits. It told you that freedom meant options, careers, brands, identities, opinions, all carefully prepared so you'd mistake movement for meaning. You can change your clothes, your phone, your job, your city, but not the structure that makes you feel like you need all of them. That's why the illusion works. It doesn't trap your body, it traps your attention. You live in a catalog of lives that someone else curated. Which version of yourself would you like to be today? The productive one, the spiritual one, the ambitious one. Pick your mask. There's an app for each. Your feed becomes a mirror that never shows you who you are, only who you should be buying from, copying, envying. You don't wake up and ask, who am I? You wake up and ask, what did I miss? They call it progress when you consume faster. They call it individuality when you personalize your cage. They call it freedom when you no longer remember what silence feels like. Every notification is a tiny tug on your mind. Every ding is a reminder that you exist as long as you keep reacting. Every click, every scroll, every purchase is a small vote not for the world you truly want, but for the world that needs you distracted. And the more you believe that choosing is the same as changing, the longer the system survives. Because as long as you're busy selecting between the options, you never ask who designed the menu. Real freedom isn't about having more to choose from. Real freedom is seeing the machinery behind the choices. But once you start to see the machine, something else begins to break the comfort it gave you. Fear was the system's first invention. Not money, not work, fear. Because fear is the perfect currency, it never runs out, and everyone accepts it. You fear losing your job, your status, your place in the crowd. You fear being judged for thinking differently. You fear failing publicly more than you fear dying quietly. And when fear becomes familiar, you stop calling it fear, you start calling it normal life. That's why the system doesn't need to force you. It just needs to remind you what you could lose. And then it gives you comfort, not too much, just enough to make the cage feel like home. Comfort is how control becomes invisible. Comfort softens the edges of your curiosity, numbs the tension of your doubts, and wraps obedience in a feeling called safety. You tell yourself you're grateful. You tell yourself you're fine. But deep down, you know safety was the price of your freedom. You stay in the job that drains you because it pays for the lifestyle that numbs you. You keep the friendships that exhaust you because they prove you're not alone. You hold on to routines that make you miserable because they keep you from facing the unknown. You start saying things like, it could be worse, at least it's stable. Who am I to ask for more? And with every sentence, you build another invisible wall around yourself. Every time you feel that slight discomfort, that moment when truth knocks louder than fear, the system whispers, relax, don't overthink. You're lucky to be here. And you listen. Because comfort always sounds like kindness, even when it's control. And the moment you stop fearing the discomfort of truth, the system starts to lose control. Awakening doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like grief. Because before you wake up, you belong somewhere. You believe in something. You fit. And then suddenly, the colors you once loved start to fade. The conversations feel empty. The goals you chased lose their meaning. You begin to see what others can't, not because you're better, but because you stopped looking away. The truth doesn't set you free. It removes your illusions, and what's left is heavy. You realize that the system didn't just give you a role. It gave you an identity, the achiever, the people pleaser, the quiet one, the strong one, the one who never fails. And when you start questioning the system, you're really questioning who you thought you were. That's why most people don't want awareness. They don't really want truth. They want comfort with prettier lies. They want the feeling of doing better without having to let go of the parts of themselves that were built to be loved by the system. Because awareness is expensive, it costs peace, belonging, and the life you thought was yours. It takes away the excuses you used to hide behind. It forces you to meet yourself without the costume. You start to grieve the old version of you, the one who believed, who trusted, who didn't see the strings. You miss the ignorance even as you're grateful it's gone. But that pain, that confusion, that sense of standing between two worlds no longer asleep, but not yet fully awake, is the proof that something real is waking up. Freedom doesn't begin when you escape the system. It begins when the system no longer defines you. You stop measuring your worth by money, approval, or progress. You start asking different questions, not how do I win, but why was I playing? And slowly the noise fades. You realize that the world outside is not where the chains were kept. They were in your habits, your fears, your reflex to obey without asking why. You begin to unlearn. You unlearn the idea that your value depends on your productivity. You unlearn the belief that rest is laziness. You unlearn the reflex of apologizing for taking up space. You unlearn the story that says your life only matters if someone else is impressed by it. And when you unlearn what you were taught to believe, you begin to rebuild not a life that looks free, but a mind that feels free. The system can still touch your circumstances. It can still affect your income, your surroundings, your opportunities, but it can't control your awareness. It can't reach the part of you that is watching, questioning, choosing differently. You become the observer instead of the product, the author instead of the script, because once you see, you can't unsee. Once you wake up, you can't go back to sleep, and that's when you understand. The real revolution was never about changing the world first. It was about changing the way you exist inside it. You were never meant to understand the system, but now that you do, you start to see it everywhere in conversations, in dreams, in the small choices that once felt like yours. Understanding doesn't give you power over it. It gives you distance from it. You stop fighting shadows and start observing the patterns. You stop asking for permission to think. You stop waiting for the system to validate the life you want to live. You begin to realize that freedom was never something the system could give you, because anything it gives, it can take back. Freedom is what remains when you no longer ask the system who you're allowed to be. The system doesn't end when you escape it. It ends when you stop believing it defines who you are. Because once awareness begins, the illusion starts to dissolve. And maybe that's all awakening really is, not destroying the system, but remembering that you were never truly inside it.